Yeah, there was this one story he talked about where you can't play while you're at work and you can't work while you're at play. And so he would go to the beach and he's like, oh, I wish I was at my office to answer these phone calls. And then he missed the time with his family. And then he was at, his office thinking, oh, I wish I was at the beach, and he said, you can't be in the shower, taking a shower while you're thinking about how to answer phone calls and work. And so I got into car accidents, man. I'd be on the phone talking and I'd get into a head-on accident because I was too busy doing two things at one time. And so being a person with ADD, that was like super calming. That really resonated with me. And so now when I do something, I realize that, okay, I'm doing this thing and, they say be present, right? But I'm able to filter that out now as opposed to just trying to like juggle too many things at one time that cause a lot of issues.
Tony, welcome to the Creators Canvas. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
So where I wanted to start this conversation was, kind of at the inception of your content creation journey. I know from looking at your videos, you actually, recently started at the beginning of this year, right? So where was your headspace at and what helped you drive that decision?
Yeah, it's actually really funny because I've been trying to get on social media for quite a few years. I own a company that does social media marketing, which is ironic. But this January, my wife was challenging me. She's like, hey, you really got to hop on social media and try it out. And for me, I was kind of reserved because it's kind of taboo for me. I don't even like the sound of my own voice half the time. So hopping on this was really hard. And so the first video I posted was because my wife had challenged me that day. And she's like, you know what, I'm just going to post on my channel first and you can do whatever you want. So it's up to you. And I'm hyper competitive. So when I found out she did that, I tried to cut her in front of her and do it myself. So that's when the first video came about.
That's incredible. And what I love about that is it sounds like you and your wife have a relationship dynamic where you guys elevate each other, which I think is so important. How important has that type of influence been on your life?
I'd say that's everything for me, man. I used to work in the medical field and she'd always tell me day in, day out, she'd be telling me like, you should quit your job, you can do better, just branch out and do something. And so she's always lit that fire underneath me. But I think she believed in me more than I believed in myself at the time. And so everything that we do now from, the social media to the company to investing in real estate, that's all from her conception. She has these visions and she, to have someone believe in you is like pretty much everything, right? So that's how it comes about. So her and me, we collaborate on everything that we do. Everything kind of passes off of her. I like to get that female intuition. They have a different view on things and it kind of softens up the male side of it.
Completely agree. And you touched upon, having been in the medical industry before and, from watching your videos and doing some research, that's definitely a topic I want to expand on later. But, to further talk about, your wife, you said something very beautiful. You said, she believed in you more than you believed in yourself at a certain point in time in your life. And what impact did that have on you and how special was that? I feel like that's what we all want.
Yeah, at first I thought it was annoying, right? Because like when you have your wife kind of beat down on you every day, like, you're so miserable at work. How come you don't do something else? At first I was irritated by it. And I was like, well, if I quit my job, I can't really take care of anybody. And, this whole time she had this very calm confidence that we would be okay. So that was like everything for me as a man, especially because I grew up in a household that was a little bit difficult growing up. And my dad was like super macho and that kind of thing. So I thought I had to hold my own. And then I didn't realize until a little bit later how much I appreciated that nudge that she gave me. But it was like not a forceful nudge. It was kind of like a little voice in my head all the time.
Yeah, and it's beautiful when someone can see something in us that, we can't see in ourselves at a certain moment. It reminds me like of, teachers in the past or coaches that we grew up with, and they play that role, very strongly. And so, kind of touching upon your past, you mentioned you used to be in the medical field. From what I understand, there was a point in time where I believe you got laid off from that. And what was that experience like? And how did that shift the trajectory of your life? Because now you're on a completely different path.
Yeah, man, I spent so much time getting into school to graduate for the medical stuff. And, I got laid off from the first job and then I had a handshake deal with a radiologist to open up his offices for the second one. And he pretty much cut me out of the deal once I started his facility. And I was moping around a lot, to be honest with you. I was on unemployment. And the whole time she was pregnant with my son at the time. And, it was heartbreaking. And I found out that I couldn't control anything, and everything that I tried, from applying for new jobs to just forcing my way through, it never worked out. And so I found during that time, everything was stripped away from me. I didn't even live in a house. I was in a hotel for 3 months while my wife just had our baby. But yeah, during that time, I surrendered everything, and I didn't know what it was called back in the day. Some people are religious. At the time, I was anti-religious at
Hmm.
all. And I found something during that time, and because I surrendered that feeling and that control, everything changed after that. I just kind of just took it day by day and just appreciated the little things in life after that.
That is unbelievable. And, that moment where it sounds like you found your faith, how are you with your faith now when things aren't as desolate as they were when you found it? Because you get to see that faith under a completely new light.
Yeah, now it's more of a calming sensation, right?
Mm.
So now I could describe it as like that kind of a warm and fuzzy feeling of security.
Mhm.
Before when I first found it, it was like a overwhelming feeling. Now it's like a more steady anchoring type of feel that I
Mm.
have, and then I know that I can rely back on that. So like if everything's stripped away from me now, I'm having a bad month or a bad day, I can go back to my faith and really kind of use that to get by and understand what the important things are in life rather than just like
Mm.
the external stuff.
Yeah, it's beautiful because it sounds like it's, something that will always anchor you, regardless of whether you're in a positive or negative headspace. And I think that's what can be so powerful about faith. Going back to a little bit about, your content creation, journey, Tony. So you mentioned you posted that first video, in competition with your wife. And it's interesting because the voice that you've kind of developed for yourself is, you are very vulnerable when it comes to telling your story. And then also you are very uplifting in terms of, trying to teach people that what they can do in business and in life. And that's some of the coaching that you do. So how did you land on kind of those two verticals for your content, and how do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, so I like the purpose behind getting on social media. My purpose was to try to tell my story about like being disadvantaged, being having an abusive family, and then a story of triumph. Like I can get past that and be okay in life without having that mental crutch that a lot of people carry with them when they're traumatized when they're
Yep.
younger. So that was the core behind everything I was trying to do, and then it kind of slowly you pivot and it evolves into something a little bit different. But I wanted to keep that core thing. That's why I kept on going back and forth between like the old traumatic stories and then the new stuff. And I was trying to convey that, like you can go through this and be completely fine
Mhm.
and not have it be like a huge crutch in your life. So that's like the core concept of what I was trying to do, is to try to impact people. But I wasn't trying to do anything as far as like online where I needed to get people to do something with me. It was more of like me just trying to share like a audio, like a video diary, so to speak, for my kids to
Mm.
see one day when they're older.
Yeah, beautifully said. And so it sounds like, at the top layer, this is serving as a video diary for you to tell your story and to show people that you can go through these things but overcome them. So if you peel that back one layer, why do you have such a strong conviction to do that for other people and share that message?
Yeah, because I grew up in a really strange neighborhood. It was really bad, poverty stricken, that kind of thing, abusive alcoholic father. And I found out that a lot of my peers at the time growing up with, a lot of them are, gone now. They're either locked up or, dead or whatever it is on that part.
Mhm.
But I wanted to kind of convey to the youth or anyone that's going through problems that, if me being a kid from the street that was abused by my father, that was into all types of weird stuff, can get to a place of happiness, right? Where I found
Mm.
the right spouse and I have the right business and I got free from all that stuff, then I wanted to show people that's, what you can do, because I was an atheist to the point where I got into a fist fight with a guy that was preaching God to me at the time. And so, that's the kind of story I was trying to tell people, is that there was a lot of women like housewives that were being beaten by their
Yeah.
husbands, right? And when they saw some of my videos, they DM'd me and stuff, and that was my mom's situation. And
Mm.
then from my situation as a kid, I got people saying I was bullied or I was beat up by my father, all types of bad stuff. And then I was like, that was me as a kid. So that's kind of how I wanted to relate to the audience.
Yeah, and those are powerful stories because anyone who has experienced anything remotely close to that can, really grip onto, how that has affected them, in life now. And it's interesting because when we think about the life circumstances that we grow in, Tony, sometimes people can fall into the trap of blaming what they went through in the past to
Right.
justify what's going on for them in the present. And for you, you had every reason to be like that, but you didn't fall into that type of victim mindset. And why do you think that is?
Well, I contribute that back to my wife again, because I met her back when I was about 17 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the lowest point. I was struggling with a lot of things in my life at that time. And, she being from a family that was halfway decent and normal, she told me like all the things I knew or I grew up with was wrong, right? So she had to help me kind of retrain my thought process and retrain how I do things and my morals and habits. So I met her thankfully early on. And from there, I was kind of like relearning how to be a person again, because in my household, my dad was always gone. It was always a very challenging situation. And my mom was just trying to get by, because she was abused as well. So I was 17, fresh out of high school, and I was like wild, right? But yeah, she taught me, and her mom also taught me a lot of stuff too, because her mom owned a business, like I was telling you. And she was, it was almost like that rich dad, poor dad story,
Yeah.
right? My rich, poor mom, and she just showed me how to look at life in a different view. And so, yeah, I contribute that solely to my wife,
Wow.
who's my wife now. Yeah.
One thing I'll tell you, Tony, is, having grown up in a household where there was, domestic violence, your stories definitely resonated a lot with me. And so, just wanted to add to the people who have already communicated to you that, thank you for sharing your story. It seriously means a lot, especially thinking about not only having experienced it, but overcoming it, I think is like that piece that can be so inspiring. And so for you, are you doing some life coaching work now?
Yeah. So the whole point of this thing was I figured, if I got 20 people to follow
Yeah.
me and, two people would got on the group, it'd be great. So I wanted to offer something that was like just someone to talk to, because I didn't have a mentor growing up, and that really helped me once I did find somebody to kind of latch onto. So I did offer the free group training. At first, it was more business oriented, and then later it kind of turned to a life type of thing too,
Yeah.
where people would DM me or join the group and say they've got problems with things at home, or they just didn't have confidence. And so I was able to kind of relate to those kind of people, and that was the mission after that.
Wow. And so how is that group going now? What are your aspirations for it?
Yeah, so it started off as I wanted to show people how to create their own business, doing different marketing, that kind of thing. I have two students that are doing that, and they're about to launch today. And then a bunch of other people, I found out, I'm like, well, you can't box them into what you're doing as far as what my company's doing. And so I figured, I was asking people what do they want, what are their goals in life, and so I was able to kind of open that up. And so we went from like 2 members to now we got like 65
Oh my
members.
gosh.
For me, that just blows my mind because I figured I wouldn't even have 5 people. So it's definitely interesting.
Yeah. And I think it's incredible because you get to play this role of someone that, you wish that you had in your own life.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I was missing because looking back now, the one thing I was lacking was, I mean, at the time was a quote unquote father
Yeah.
figure. I found a mother figure, and then I found a spouse figure, so it was like even better. But I felt like I could have moved much quicker, maybe shaved off 20 years of my life, and done this a little bit faster if I had someone to talk to.
Yeah. And I think about the importance of, mentorship and, that's what you're giving a lot of these people. And so if you don't mind me asking, so are they of all different ages? Like what is the demographics of the people in your group?
Oh man, they go as young as there was a 14-year-old kid that reached out, and they were getting bullied in Europe somewhere. I think they're in the UK. All the way
Wow.
to 65-year-old person, a female that was abused by her husband, just trying to get back on her feet now. So it ranges pretty wide. And then on YouTube, I'm talking to this kid now that kid that was being bullied. So I offered to sign them up for jujitsu class to kind of give them
Wow.
some confidence and stuff like that. So it's more like a game to see if like I said, I was super competitive. I want to see if I can bring this person from where they're at now to some place that's just unbelievable, and that's the mission.
Are there any people in kind of the self-development slash motivation space that you look at, and you have learned from?
Yeah, man, Jim Rohn has been my guy.
Mm.
So back again, I had a mental breakdown. Woke up at 2 a.m. one morning, just heart palpitating, and I found through my wife again. She mentioned Jim Rohn, and I was on there, and I did a year-long study of Jim Rohn's teachings from 5 o'clock in the morning till about 8 o'clock, and I did this for a whole year
Mm.
just to understand, because the way he delivers his message is very calming, and I was able to dissect every little detail of what was ailing me,
Mhm.
and so he's like the number one top guy for sure for me.
Tony, when you were in that point of, trying to, climb out of the hole that you were in, were you doing it for yourself or were you doing it for your now wife, or who were you doing it for?
It started off as doing it for my wife, right? Because she was very believing in me at the time. But then at one point, like when I first started the company, I spent a good 6 years away from my son, didn't even know who he was, just busy working. And then I never took care of my core things, my core issues, which was anxiety and stress.
Mm.
And so when I started to have those mental breakdowns, my body was starting to break down. And then I was like, I think I might be having a heart attack. And through that experience, I was like, okay, it's not for anyone else anymore. This is for my mental well-being. So I'm gonna take care of myself. And so that's what came about, that whole, the whole Jim Rohn thing. And then I implemented Wim Hof, which is like the Iceman, right? That's my guy too. I attribute those two for saving my life because I was headed down a path of deterioration. Like success was there professionally, but physically, I mean, I was just like on autopilot, walking around with my wife all day with my phone stuck to my ear. So it wasn't a happy feeling.
You didn't have everything squared away holistically, it sounds like.
Yeah, I didn't take care of myself first, for sure.
Whenever you were doing a lot of research into Jim Rohn's teachings, what were some takeaways that have really stuck out to you that you hold near and dear to your heart? And obviously, I know a lot of it was valuable, but I'm sure there are some things that stuck out to you.
Yeah, there was this one story he talked about where you can't play while you're at work, and you can't work while you're at play. And so he would go to the beach, and he's like, "Oh, I wish I was at my office to answer these phone calls." And then he missed the time with his family, and then he was at his office thinking, "Oh, I wish I was at the beach." And he said, you can't be in the shower, taking a shower while you're thinking about how to answer phone calls and work. And so I got into car accidents, man. I'd be on the phone talking, and I'd get into a head-on accident because I was too busy doing two things at one time. And so being a person with ADD, that was like super calming. That really resonated with me. And so now when I do something, I realize that, okay, I'm doing this one thing, and they say be present, right? But I'm able to filter that out now, as opposed to just trying to like juggle too many things at one time that cause a lot of issues.
Oh, interesting. So the core of Jim's story was if you are thinking about something else in your present moment, then you aren't actually being present, right?
Right, and you're not effective at either one. So you're kind of juggling two things. And I equate it to like this: when I'm driving a car and I'm sitting there trying to type an email message to someone because I think that it's so important that it has to be done now. The email message sucks. I get into a car accident, and it's like no one wins, right? So that's how I figured it now. And that changed my life. But now I'm kind of like an old man style where I can't do two things at once, but it's helped me a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's interesting because if I think about everything you experienced growing up and all of the development you've done, how have you taken everything you've learned and applied that to, your two kids that you are now raising with your wife? Because I'm sure there are so many things.
Yeah, they get annoyed with me now because I'm always trying to coach and mentor them. So I took on the task of coaching both their soccer teams last
Oh,
season.
awesome.
I'm just very vocal, and because I didn't have a mentor, I really try to be that spot for them. But I'm trying to find the groove of not being annoying and being a little bit more guiding. But it's everything for me and my wife right now. Every single aspect that we deal with them about, whether it be chores all the way to sports to school and friendship and how to navigate through life, has that lesson in there. And then ultimately we try to let them know that's their decision, but we're just here to guide them as opposed to force them to be a certain way. A lot of Asian families, like I grew up with, very forceful,
Yes.
but no tools handed. You know what I mean? You got to get A's, but I can't help you with your homework. That kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, literally. That resonates a lot. Tiger parenting, I'm sure, is definitely something that was very common for a lot of kids in our generation. Yeah, it's interesting because, when I think about trying to mentor or guide someone, it's a very delicate balance of understanding how to press, that person's buttons because like other people resonate with different types of feedback. And so it's like having the ability to see which button to press for what specific person. And so how have you kind of, thought about that, especially because you're not only coaching your two kids on the soccer teams, but you're coaching all of these other people's children as well.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. So my wife and I find ourselves in bed every single night, and we've had tears of joy all the way to just tears of, oh my gosh, I hope I'm doing the right thing.
Mm,
We do a thing where we reevaluate every night. Did we parent correctly today? Were we too hard?
mm,
And was there anything that we could have done better that maybe take away some of the baggage that our parents put into us? Are we delivering that to our kids? So we really want to break that generational curse. And I do that with, I'm trying to coach right now is like, let's take away all of the things that I learned, right? All the things that I came up with, and let's come at with, what experiences you had in your life. And then we try to adjust from there. But we definitely had this issue where it was a little forceful at first. It's kind of pushy. And then we realized that that's not working either. And everyone learns at their own pace and their own style. Because my kids are completely different. And one kid's super one way, and it's very easy to mentor. And the other kid's a little bit combative. And then it's just a really weird dichotomy, but we're trying, we're trying to figure it out. A lot of tears, man, a lot of lonely nights.
Yeah, of course. And I imagine it is a full-time job raising, one kid. And so having two, I'm sure is a big task for you and your wife.
I can't complain though, because she's been taking care of everything up until probably this
Mm,
year. So I wake up, I'd have food on my table, I'd have drinks done, smoothies, the kids are at school. And
wow.
so I did not wake up out of this cloud until about a year
Hmm.
ago, to where I was like, oh my God, I haven't done anything to help her out. So now I'm trying to focus more on, how to help her out with what her goals are like, because a lot of females, they tend to put their goals
Yeah.
aside and their dreams and aspirations, and then they do it for your husband. All of a sudden the husband becomes something, and then the wife is like, okay, what about me? And next thing you know, you're 50 years old, so it's kind of difficult.
Yeah, and I think it takes a lot of self-awareness to then recognize that, for your wife. And so you mentioned that she also, is in content creation. What type of content does she make?
Well, she started back during
Uh-huh.
COVID, right? So that's when all the dances and the cute stuff was
Yeah.
going on. And, she shot video day in, day out, and she was bored, so she wanted to try
Mhm.
it. And then we shot one video that went viral, but at the time we were like, I don't know if this viral video. It's kind of more adult related. At the time, it was like one of those
Yeah.
trends, and it got like 4 million views or something, and we were like, oh my God, look at all these comments, and we didn't realize how mean people are on online, right?
Yes.
You could be helping a homeless person, and someone will throw something in there and tell you how horrible you
Yeah.
are. She kind of slowed that down for the past 2 or 3 years, and then now she's trying to get back on there. But she's the one that had this whole vision for content creation in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting because to your points, you could be, handing something to a homeless person and then something negative will come in the comments, like doing this for likes or clicks or something like that.
Yeah.
So there will always be, someone who doesn't resonate with your content. Have you experienced any of that in your content or videos?
Oh my gosh, so much. Yeah, I've
Mm.
got things from people talking about how weird my eyebrow looks. I slept weird one day, all the way to like really mean things. They went from that to some people have racial comments that has nothing to do with the
Hmm.
topic.
Wow.
One video I shot inside my closet, which happened to have some kind of box back there with a brand name or something. And this lady was like, hey, you're trying to show off whatever this was back here. I can't even pronounce the word, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. But yeah,
Wow.
it kind of, at first I kind of got like insulted by it. And then after a while, I was like, I just won't read the comments anymore. I don't really care unless it's a comment from a person that asks for help or
Of
for, they
course.
need something. Yeah, but I just scroll through them now and it's just whatever.
Yeah, and so how did you get to the point where, those comments affected you a little bit in the beginning, but now, they don't bother you as much? Because I feel like for content creators and anyone in the public space or that is something that can be challenging. And especially to your point, women really struggle with that because, sometimes they can be a little bit more sensitive to those comments.
Yeah, at first it got my blood boiling. I would sit there and try to comment back. And, when you get to a part where you're stalemated and that person is just
Yeah.
unreasonable, where you're arguing with someone and all of a sudden they have no more points left to talk
Yeah.
about. And so I found out like I spent a lot of time just commenting and arguing. And again, my wife was like, man, seriously, you can't sit there and spend your time being angry and your heart rate's up just to
Mm,
comment to these people. And so I was like, you're totally right. So I stopped commenting completely to the ones I felt was kind of
yeah.
weird. And it's been fantastic because I haven't looked back since and I haven't really thought about it. It doesn't hurt me at all. And, worst case, you can just block people.
Yeah, 100%. So as, you continue to make videos, those comments, positive and negative, will continue to grow. And so, for you, Tony, what plans do you have, for your content? Because, it sounds like, the more reach that you can have, the more people that, you can help. And ultimately, I know that's, one of your biggest goals is to help.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm trying now. Like it's hard to gauge because when I first started, I had a couple thousand followers, which were very dedicated, like very targeted type
Yeah.
of people. And then I posted one video that just went like wildfire, and then I got more followers from there. So I want to get back to the roots of it. I
Mm,
did a social experiment. I put up a video about politics or about just weird things about money and
yeah.
stuff, and people were crazy, and that worked. And then the video after that, I told people, I said, look, this was an experiment. How come you get so much attention for crazy types of news articles and
Oh, interesting.
headlines, but how come I can't get any views for, things that are helping
Hmm.
people? And so that kind of worked for me. And for me, it's just like at the end of the day, the thing I need to do more of though, because the concept of what I was trying to do was have my faith built into that, the values of
Yep.
that, without alienating people because people are so weirded out by different people's religions and things. But it's all universal. We're all just, one type of
Hmm.
people. But I'm trying my best to stay on target with what I'm trying to talk about. But I have a hard time with coming up with, I don't want to do outside the box things. I just want to talk about what's on my mind at the time.
Mm.
So something might come up, I might read something, I might see like a Jim Rohn video that inspired me to think about something
Yeah.
else. That's kind of the direction I'm going. And if it grows, it grows. If not, it's, whatever after that.
Yeah, because when you're doing it with good intentions, you don't have to look at those numbers. I know when I first started shooting my content, it was like August of 2022. I had posted between that August and like October, like 100 videos, and there's like no growth. But it's like if you do something that fulfills, what you think your greater purpose is, then you don't care. And then so things blew up for me, and it's the ability to stay consistent, towards that purpose. And so for you, Tony, how do you think about purpose, and what do you feel like your purpose is? And I know it's like multifaceted because you have family, friends, things that you're doing for these other people. So I know there's many layers to that.
Yeah, first of all, your stuff is amazing. So like the questions you ask people on video are so simplistic, but it hits so
Mm.
deep. I started seeing your videos. I'm like, man, because every single person's unique with a different viewpoint and
Hmm.
experience. And every video I saw was like something even better than I saw in the previous video. So I thought that's brilliant how you frame the question and how you just let people talk about it. So that, that inspired me a lot too. And it's just like,
Mm.
well, maybe sometimes less is more because you let the person or the topic speak for itself. So like for me, like the purpose for me is to continue to hammer down the fact that you can come from nothing as long as you make a conscious choice to remove yourself from that
Yep.
environment. And like you were talking about earlier about being self-aware, that's everything, right? Like if I do something down to as small as, playing soccer with my son, I'm very self-aware of, am I pushing him too hard? Am I using the right words?
Mm.
Just check yourself. And that's the purpose behind what I'm trying to deliver, is to just to bring some more fun and life to humanity a little bit. People are really kind of anxious and they're super strung out. But the most important part is I want to see people succeed, because in this day and age, like you don't have to have a doctorate's degree in something or doctor and lawyer like our families probably pushed us to
Agreed.
do. None of that's necessary, right? I would love for you to go to college, but if you can't go to college and you have a skill at something else, I want to bring out and develop that skill with you to
Mm.
see if you can turn that into something even better than being in debt with college or whatever floats your
Yeah.
boat. But especially to those kids out there that are living in poverty and they have to resort to doing other things to get by. I did all that, and it's like you don't have to do that. There are other ways, and if you just stick to the program, you can definitely get it done too.
Beautifully said. And that reminds me of a story that, do you know who Alex Hormozy is? He's quite big on social media right now.
Yes, I love
Yes,
it.
I'm a big fan
Yeah.
as well. And he was talking about how, if you take a person that grew up with privilege and a person without privilege, it turns out that the person that grew up without privilege actually has a privilege that the other person doesn't have, which is the ability to speak to people that experience what they experienced. And I think anyone who has experienced hardship has, responsibility to, show people and be that example that, hey, like you don't have to let that define you to find out where you want to go in life. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things. And if I think about, your content, Tony, it definitely accomplishes a lot of that. And I know through the stories that you've told about your childhood on social media, they have been, quite deep and tragic and emotional. And so one that really stuck out to me was, when you told the story about growing up in like a cockroach infested home, and, that's literally, you turn on the lights and there would be like hundreds that scatter. And do you share those type of stories with your kids so that they know how lucky they are? Because I think about my parents who, immigrated from Vietnam. I grew up with a silver spoon compared to them. And so, how do you kind of balance like showing them or telling them, how good they have it with not trying to like push it down their throat, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So like, that's a daily struggle too, and we struggle with that because now you obviously going to give your kids everything you never had growing
Hmm.
up. I do layer those stories in. We went to Bangkok not too long ago, and I showed them the dumpster kids. How these kids live on the train tracks with no roofs over their heads. It hits them. They understand it at the time, and I tell them about all my stories about all types of weird things that happened to me, especially that cockroach
Yeah.
one. And for some reason they grasp it at first, but it kind of comes and goes very quickly because they don't understand what that's like
Mm.
because their life is so much different now. But I do try to implement that, and my wife and I talk all the time about how we can that was a gift, right? Having an abusive family, growing up in cockroach infested homes was a gift that I would not change because it kind of gives you that resilience. Now with kids living so well, they don't have that kind of resilience and they might crumble when that time comes. So my goal is to just explain that to them, but I'm going to have to show them physically how that's done. So, we have we have everything planned out for when they're 16, their first job, they have to go through X, Y, and Z before they can do other things. But that's the hard part, and that's the part where we're still learning and trying to figure out how to deliver that message to them without being that old guy that's like, oh, back in my day, this is how things were, Yeah. So it's a tough thing because I don't believe you can do that unless you bring them to that environment and actually show them what it's like.
Yeah, beautifully said. And, that point you made about there's a concern that, when they do face adversity, they could crumble. I think about a story in my own childhood. So, like I mentioned, grew up with the silver spoon. Mom provided everything to me. And I remember I was 16 and I had failed my first chemistry exam ever. That was the most adversity I had ever experienced up until that point.
Yeah.
And Tony, I literally crumbled. I dropped out of that chemistry class. I took an easier one because I just didn't know how to handle that, And I think about that story and think about, not to compare it in a toxic way, but I compare it to like the adversity that my parents experienced, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like literally night and day difference, which is funny.
Not even close, right? For them, it's like we had to hop on a boat that was going nowhere. It's crazy what they went through. And so, like, I don't, like our generation, we look back and thank God that we're here, thanks to their sacrifice. And if they have PTSD from it and they treated you bad, it's like, you know what, water under the bridge. They had to deal with crazy stuff, and so we're like, first world problem things.
Yeah, completely agree. And at what point did you develop that compassion for your parents and what they put you through? Because in the beginning, it's you hate them for it. And then as time goes on, you're like, okay, actually, that experience was a gift. And also, I can't be so sure that I wouldn't have done the same thing in their shoes. And that's something that I think about a lot.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, for the longest time, I did not deal with any of these things that I grew up with. But it gives me closure to think that, okay, my dad was an alcoholic. He was abusive to my mom and myself. He was just many more stories. But I contribute that to, the trauma he went through. And he did the best he could with the tools he was handed. And he grew up without a father. His father was killed in the war at the river somewhere. And so he grew up without, any kind of structure, and then came to America without the language. And so I said, you know what? I'm gonna give him a break because, in my situation, if I was like that, I might not have came back home, to my family. So that helped me get closure and it helped me kind of get through the years. But I never really carried much resentment. I forgave them a long time ago, and I keep telling them that, but they still harbor that shame of the way they treated us. But I've kind of moved on from that. I never had it as baggage until a few years ago, where I had this anxiety and this anger that was inside of me that I never dealt with. But yeah, to this day, I don't talk to my father much or my mom much, but there's no type of like blaming involved at all, because I'm super blessed now with the family that I've always wanted, and things are going great. So I mean, how can you go back and blame them when you're doing the best you can do now? So.
Of course, and I think there's such a deep appreciation for the environment you're in now because you experienced something, completely different growing up, and that must be like a pinch me moment for you every day.
Yeah, I mean, I have dreams. I still have nightmares of going back to where I was from in St. Louis, Missouri, growing up and seeing my dad around, and I wake up in a cold sweat, and I have to pinch myself and look around and be like, oh, okay, no, that was just a flashback, and now your life is so much better. But yeah, I mean, but those little nuggets of adversity and just those times that were horrible, I don't know how. I wish I can bottle that into like a perfume bottle, right? And just spray it on kids and just let them feel it. So we can move on and be like, yeah, that sucked. I don't want nothing to do with that. It's a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of things I'm still working through because of that time. But I don't ever blame them for it. I just know that thank God they had me, and then they moved on. Like God's purpose was for them to have me and to get me here. And then from there, it's just, that's their story and my story separately.
Yeah, completely agree. And going back to, when you first started posting, content at the beginning of this year, what was the point where you're like, okay, so I tried this and I actually want to keep doing it? What was that feeling like for you and what happened?
Yeah, so I think it boils back to what you were saying earlier, like if you're doing something with purpose, right? So I never fathomed having more than 100 people even want to watch my stuff. And so when my whole thing was like, this kid came from poverty, like poverty, to now where you're living better. that's amazing to me, right? So that was like, okay, I got 900 views on the first video, and it took me 5 minutes to shoot. And I was like, I was nervous, I was embarrassed, I was insecure. And from that to like the second video, and then like you said, I just kept posting, and I could care less. Like, I don't care how many views you got, I don't care if anyone followed. As long as I wasn't shadow banned from the beginning, I was good. Yeah, that's the best feeling, was just posting without caring at all, without caring if there's a following. And I could care, it was like for me to go back and look at my videos and kind of see what my life was like. So that, then from there, it manifested into something a little bit better, as far as like, more followers is great, but I still want to make sure I get that impact felt by the right people. So that's the struggle now, is trying to figure that part out.
And so, you had mentioned that, before you started on your content creation journey, you were a bit hesitant to start posting on social media. And so the competition, obviously, with your wife is, what spurred it, but was vulnerability something that concerns you as one of the reasons why you didn't want to start content creation in this vein?
Yeah, in a little bit, because like I'm a pretty private person in real life. I didn't know what the repercussions would be like if I started telling stories about my brother and sister, or my dad, or my mom. I didn't know how that would affect them, should they see it one day, because I don't know if they've dealt with that kind of trauma. But I've always been very dedicated to being very open and honest with my experience, because I feel like it was so horrendous that it's not really like a pity party where like, oh, this happened to me. It's more like, oh man, can you believe I got out of that? Like, thank God I got out of that. So that's like the purpose behind it. So that really helped. But the reservations was like I told you, I didn't like the sound of my own voice. The first couple of videos, I was stuttering, and just like it really got to me. And then I was like, you know what, just forget about it, man. You're not like a supermodel, and whatever. No one cares. Like, you're an old man, whatever. And so I started doing that, and I was like, this is even better now. Like, I don't have to like do my hair. I just need to be sitting in the video, walking down the field, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it's so beautiful because it goes back to self-development, so there were like issues that, kind of made you sweat in the beginning, like, I don't like the sound of my own voice, like, I'm kind of self-conscious of how I look. And then now to get to the point where you overcame all of those things, to be comfortable, in front of the camera shooting. And so what are some self-development goals for you now that you have, kind of in the pipeline of, kind of how you want to grow?
Yeah, I'm having an issue right now, actually. So I had a video about how I started feeling depressed a little bit after I accomplished some of the milestones I wanted to, like my goals that I set out like 10 years ago. I'm kind of carrying that with me now. It started in January, lingered until about last month. And the problem I'm having is like that expectation behind your head telling you like, okay, you did something. Now, how do you top that? Like, what do you need to do to? So then I'm like killing myself trying to figure out how to grow the business more, how to coach more people, how to help my kids and more. And then I'm juggling too many things. And I ended up, like I was telling you earlier with Jim Rohn, I was not effective at anything. So I lost the past 6 months just kind of like, man, and my performance is down in every aspect. And so I'm like, okay, I need to recalibrate. So I'm going back to the basics, getting up a little bit earlier, doing my meditation, breathing, my prayers, Jim Rohn stuff. And I've got to get back on track, because I'm kind of losing my mojo, as far as like, once you get that high going and then you crash right afterwards. It's a scary feeling. I don't know what that feeling is. I'm having a hard time explaining it,
You are explaining it very well, because I am experiencing that a little bit right now as well. So it's interesting. So I would say from August up until the end of March, things were absolute blur. So like in terms of consistency and discipline, like they were at its peak. And, because of that, in April, scored like my biggest, brand deal ever, as a content creator, with Microsoft. And, for any content creator, that's like a huge milestone. And then now I think I kind of got into this trap of what you're saying of moving the goalpost, because I was like, how can I top, you think, a deal with Microsoft, And it's like, okay, so maybe I can't, so I should just stop posting, and it's just like you have these like crazy thoughts in your head of like, what are you talking about? But it's like they come up anyways.
Man, that was dead on when you said maybe I should stop posting, right? Because like such a high bar you set for yourself, and then you start doubting yourself. You're like, well, I don't know, am I like that imposter syndrome thing? And then I'm like, well, I should just stop here, because like there's no way you can move past that, right? Like your deal is like, that's amazing, like congrats on that. But you're so young too, so it's like, man, you have so much more. For me, it's like, oh man, I'm crashing from it. I have to reevaluate things before I put more fuel on the fire and not put out the fires instead.
Yeah, I can completely agree. And You mentioned, going back to the basics as one of the ways to get your mojo back. Is there anything else you have kind of recognized about the process to try to, get back on track?
Yeah. So the one thing that got me was when I was juggling all
Hmm.
these things, making priority for like materialistic type of things like goals,
Yeah.
business goals or, financial goals. I actually started moving away from my faith a little bit more.
Mm,
Ironically, I moved to a house right across the street from my church. And now that I'm here, I spend less time there. So I've taken less time out of my day to taking care of myself, my belief, my faith, and everything. And I spent more time on earthly things, is what we call it, where it's like, your business, your money, your, all this stuff that didn't really matter because if I didn't take care of myself and grow like that, then my business can't grow and then other things can't grow. So that's the one thing I've found that I've been crossing. I have a whole checklist, man. I'm like, I tried this doesn't work. And then I'm like, oh man, I spent less time with myself, right? It's everything's given to everyone else. There's less time to think and to give to yourself to nourish your soul. And that's the thing that I'm going to be working on.
yeah, beautifully said. And it's like this idea of watering each garden. And then sometimes we forget about a garden and it's like, oh shit, like there's some like dead plants and weeds I need to pull out.
There's instinct over there, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So using that garden analogy, so then would you say your, I guess, garden of faith is the one that you feel like, okay, so I need to reprioritize and put more focus on that because I've been watering everything else too much?
Yeah, I've been watering like the
Yeah.
business side, like the plants and like fruits, everything's growing. And then the one thing I found out recently was for the past 10 years, because my wife's been really
Yeah.
sacrificing herself to take care of me to do this. That's the second
Mm,
thing. And so through the quiet time and trying to water my faith part, I did realize that there's another garden that's really
yes.
important that I had watered nothing at all with. And so the second thing is like maybe let me reconnect again and find out what I can do for you instead of always playing the support, like she's always playing the support role for me. So that's the thing I'm trying to work on too. So those
Mm,
two things, I think, if I can figure those two things out, I think everything else will fall into place again.
yeah, definitely. So Tony, I want to go back to your past because, doing some, research on your videos, so you got laid off from the medical industry when your wife was 8 months pregnant. And then you also got scammed out of your life savings through an e-commerce business. And so through each of those trials and tribulations, what helped you get through it? I know your wife was a monumental part, but I think about listeners who constantly get knocked down, and sometimes it can be hard to get back up that third, fourth, fifth time because it takes a lot of resilience.
Yeah, for me, it was like, I think sometimes ignorant is definitely
Mm,
bliss. Being a person that, I mean, failed so much, a little bit ego too. I had an ego back then
mhm.
growing up, and I was like, so I fell down. Okay, what do I do next, right? So besides my wife's pep talks and everything, I think the core thing was surrendering, and I
Mm,
didn't know what that was called at the time, but letting go of the control that you're trying to have on every aspect of your life and forcing things
yeah.
to happen, as opposed to being confident and believing that okay, I did the work for that. That's going to do its own thing, and if the time comes, then great. If it doesn't come, it's okay. But having something to fall back on, like my faith was, I was able to fall back on my faith to say, well, tomorrow if my business is gone and I lose my house and my wife and I live in our little camper mini RV van with my kids, I'm still alive, right? We're still alive. We can still keep on going. And having a person next to you that says, I'm going to take that road with you. That's fine. So for me, I had to go back to like, okay, is my family healthy? My wife's still happy. We're not sick. We don't have cancer, God forbid. So there's kids that are hungry in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so they are having a bad day. Like anything we do here is not that bad of a day. I don't mind having cockroaches crawl in my mouth, but I still had a roof over my head. So, that's how I kind of went about everything.
Wow. And you mentioned control and the ability to surrender that control. So, where did the desire to be in control of everything come from for you?
Mental breakdown. So it became such a mental headache for me that I physically and mentally could no longer take it. I would have sore throats
Mm,
daily, get sick, lose my hair. I would tremble a lot, and I'd have just a super tight body, right? Like physically, that was the signs for me because I'm pretty dumb. I can have like sepsis and still be like, I'm okay. I'll just heal it myself. So it had to take something large like that to where my heart started beating in a different rhythm before I figured out like, okay, I need to surrender for real.
and now moving from, surrendering and then to realize that you don't have to be in control of everything. Something that I can see people struggling with is surrendering control can be thought of as I don't have control over my life and my trajectory. And so how do you distinguish between, those two things? Because I feel like it's a very fine line.
Yeah, I think it boils down to having belief and confidence in yourself. So for me, it was like every day I would put in the work, and I would always have this doubt in my mind, like, did you do enough? You're questioning
Yeah.
yourself, right? So I think by having that confidence to say that, okay, I'm a person with strong work ethic, I'm a person with good morals, I'm a caring person with good intentions, and so I was able to surrender that by answering those questions, like, did I do everything I
Mm,
could? Did I do that with good intentions? Am I hurting anybody? And so, like, people that are going through hard times now that are just like constantly like, oh, I don't know if I can, or it's just one bad thing after another. I think that they need to develop themselves before they go for a goal. They need to really work on their own demons first, right? Like, really
mm.
improve yourself before you can get to the next level. So my whole philosophy is called 0 to 1. It's from 0 to 1.
Peter Thiel.
Yeah, something like that, like exactly like that. But my interpretation is more like I want to take people from the very bottom and
Hmm.
just get up to level one. Like, I'm not trying to take you to level like Tony Robbins level, right? I'm just taking you from I'm desperate, I'm sick, I'm tired of my situation to, oh wow, okay, there's another route. So that's what kind of helps me get through with everything.
Yeah. And that's so beautiful because I think starting with zero momentum is and then getting a little bit is so much harder than having a little bit and then moving to that next level because it's like the energy it takes for that inertia to move yourself is like unbelievably hard. And I know, I'm sure we've both have experienced that, kind of in our low moments of getting pulled out, and sometimes it takes someone to help pull us out. So Tony, we're getting close on time, and we love to wrap up on a question of what do you wish that people knew about you? And so, the reason that, we love this question is because, as content creators and people who have, quote unquote, accomplished things like in social media's eyes, people can kind of put us at a pedestal. And so this question is meant to close that distance to show people that like, hey, we are just the same as you and we're no different.
Yeah, I think the number one thing for me is I really wish I can come through the screen and let people know what my intentions are. I'm very contrarian. I'm not trying to sell anything. I wish they can feel the intentions that I have for my audience and what I'm really trying to accomplish. As for me, it's about impact. And I know it's very cliche, but it's my intention and the purpose of why I'm doing the things I want to do and the
Yep.
messages I put out there. So I would say that's the number one thing for me.
Beautifully said. And so, are there any projects or anything like that coming up that you'd like to talk about? I know your life and business coaching is like a big initiative. Wasn't sure if there's anything else you'd like to announce to put people on people's radar.
Yeah, no, nothing really. Just trying to take that coaching thing to the next level, and that it's absolutely free. People are so apprehensive that you're going to sell them something because they've been baited and switched so much.
Of course.
Literally, man, I'm just here to see if I can reach somebody out there that needs some help, or that's going through a dark time, or that's experienced what I experienced, and just kind of take them out of that and put them into the light. And if I can accomplish that with a little bit of faith sprinkled in there without alienating anyone, because everyone's
Yep.
so sensitive now, that's the goal.
Beautifully said, Tony. And thank you so much for the conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate it, man. I love your content. And yeah.